This is adult business. Don't start with me right now, he texted, his words cold and dismissive. Moments later, the truth unraveled. My husband had drained our son's college fund and run off with his mistress. I chose silence, not as a weakness, but to listen to the voice of reason. Then my son stepped in, a quiet scalpel in the chaos. With one perfectly placed message, their whole plan began to fray. Once I found the right leverage, everything they'd stolen would slip through their fingers. You won't believe what happened next. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe and let us know where you're listening from in the comments below. My story didn't begin with the slam of a door or a screaming match. It began with the terrifying silence of a zero on my phone screen, on what should have been an utterly ordinary Wednesday morning. The soft morning light spilled through the kitchen window, painting the clean countertops in a warm golden hue. The coffee maker hummed its steady rhythm, a familiar melody, as the rich aroma of roasted beans filled the room. Dressed in my soft silk pajamas, I leaned against the counter, a white porcelain mug in my hand. Like any other day, I was scrolling idly through my phone, checking the weather, skimming a few headlines. My face was still placid, showing only the faint weariness of someone recently woken. Out of habit, my thumb tapped the green icon of my banking app. The loading circle spun for a few seconds. I took a sip of coffee, the gentle bitterness spreading over my tongue as I waited. The app opened to its familiar interface, but something was terribly wrong. The line item labeled Joint Savings Account, the one Mark and I had built together for 15 years, the one I'd always called Leo's College Fund in my head, usually displayed a promising six-figure number. Now, next to it were two stark, cold zeros, $0 and 0 cents. The mug in my hand froze halfway to my lips. I blinked once, twice, trying to will away the thought that it was just a display error. I dragged the screen down hard to refresh. The circle spun again, this time slower, mocking me. The result was the same. $0 and 0 cents. An icy chill shot down my spine, more potent than the hot coffee. The air caught in my chest. I tapped into the account details, my heart beginning to pound, a frantic drumbeat against my ribs. The transaction history showed a single damning line dated yesterday. Wire transfer, negative $175,432.58. Every last cent vanished into an anonymous account. My hand trembled, sloshing coffee over the rim of the mug. I quickly set it down on the counter, the clink of porcelain echoing in the sudden silence of the kitchen. My fingers were shaking so badly it took several attempts to open my messaging app and find the name Mark. The entire savings account. Where did you move it? I typed, each word a hammer blow. I stared at the screen, waiting for the 3 dancing dots that would signal he was replying. Seconds stretched into an eternity. Finally, a single terse message appeared. This is adult business. Don't start with me right now. The cold, dismissive tone of his words was a slap in the face. The initial shock quickly dissolved, replaced by a cold, sharp anger. There were no tears. Instead, a strange, almost clinical focus took hold of my mind. I took a deep, steadying breath, feeling the air fill my lungs, and my actions became deliberate. First, I took a screenshot, one of the zero balance, one of the transaction detail, clearly showing the date, time, and the stolen sum. Those soulless pixels were now my first piece of evidence. Next, I went to my contacts and dialed the bank's hotline. I put the phone on speaker and activated the call recording feature. Welcome to National Bank. My name is Jessica. How can I help you? A young woman's voice chirped. Hello, Jessica, I replied, my voice so calm it surprised even me. I'm calling to report what I believe is an unauthorized transaction on my joint savings account. The account number is... I read out the numbers clearly. With my other hand, I had already picked up a pen, writing everything down in a notebook. The agent's full name, Jessica R., her operator ID, and the exact time of the call. Ma'am, I'm sorry to inform you, Jessica said after a moment of verification. But as Mr. Patterson is a co-owner of the account, this transaction is considered valid by our system. We cannot reverse it without the consent of both parties or a court order. I understand, I cut in. Could you please provide me with a reference number for this report call? I carefully wrote down the reference number she gave me, every letter, every digit. I ended the call. The kitchen was just as quiet. The sun was still shining, but everything had changed forever. He thought he had erased my son's future with a single click, but he was wrong. He hadn't erased anything. He had just created a piece of irrefutable evidence, and I had just saved it. The war had begun, not with a scream, but with the quiet click of a screenshot. The silence in the kitchen after the call with the bank was heavier than before. I stood motionless, pen still in hand, staring at the numbers and the name Jessica R. in my notebook. The initial surge of anger had subsided, leaving behind a cold void, a harsh reality. Legally, Mark had done nothing wrong. He was a co-owner. He had the right. But morally, as a husband, as a father, his action was a betrayal beyond forgiveness. We were separated, a civilized term for a dying marriage. It was meant to be a space between two adults, a mutual agreement to breathe before making a final decision. But he had treated it as a black hole to swallow his responsibilities, a free pass for his greed. I found a chair and sat down. My hands were no longer shaking. Instead, they clenched into fists. I couldn't let him get away with this. I opened my phone, found Mark's number, and called. It rang for several long beats, and I thought he wouldn't pick up. But then, the line connected. "What is it?" His voice was sharp, impatient. "The money, Mark," I said, my voice steady, devoid of any tremor. "That was our son's future. That was Leo's college fund." There was a pause on the other end. Then I heard him let out a long, annoyed sigh. "I just borrowed it," he said, his tone as casual as if he were talking about taking a few bucks from my wallet. "Look, after the divorce is finalized, I'll pay it back. Double. I have a plan. Don't make a big deal out of it." "Borrowed?" I almost laughed at the audacity. "You didn't ask, you just took." "That's not borrowing, Mark. That's called stealing." "Think what you want," he snapped, the irritation in his voice growing. "I'm busy. We'll talk about this later." And he hung up. The dial tone buzzed in my ear, but his words hung in my mind. Borrowed it. An admission. A flimsy one, but an admission nonetheless. I immediately went back to our text thread from that morning and took another screenshot of our brief exchange. His dismissal, now sitting right next to his admission. My first two pieces of evidence. I stood up and walked into my home office. In a desk drawer, among old papers, was a thick file folder. I pulled out a pale yellow document, a copy of the court summons, setting the date for our first divorce hearing next month. It was clear proof of our current legal status. Still married on paper, still bound by shared marital assets. And his action was a textbook case of dissipating those assets right before trial. I placed the summons next to my notebook. A plan began to form. This war wouldn't be fought through screaming phone calls or bitter text messages. It would be fought on paper, with numbers and evidence that could not be denied. I sat numbly in my office for a long time, staring at the small but powerful pieces of evidence on my desk. The screenshots, the call log, the court summons. The initial rage had given way to a heavy sense of dread. I knew I had to do something, but where to even begin? The path ahead felt shrouded in fog, filled with legal jargon and confrontations I was not prepared for. The sound of the front door opening and closing softly cut through my thoughts. Leo was home. I quickly brushed away the tears that threatened to fall, composing my face into a mask of calm before my son could see me. Leo, 15 years old, lanky with thick glasses and a permanent case of bedhead, walked into the room. He glanced at the stack of papers on my desk, then looked directly into my eyes. He didn't ask, "What's wrong, Mom?" His intelligent eyes seemed to scan the entire situation and draw a preliminary conclusion. "Dad took the money," he said. It wasn't a question, it was a statement. I nodded, a lump forming in my throat. I showed him the screenshot on my phone. He examined it carefully, his eyes gliding over the enormous number without flinching. His reaction stunned me. There was no panic, no tears, no why. My son didn't scream or slam his fist on the table. He set down his backpack, walked over to the supply cabinet, and pulled out a large sheet of white poster board and a few colored markers. He taped the paper to the empty wall across from my desk. Then, with clean, deliberate strokes, he began to draw the first lines of a timeline. "Mom, we don't need to hack anyone," Leo said, his hands still moving, his voice uncannily calm. Their digital footprint is everywhere, all public. We just need to connect the dots. I stood up and walked over to him. On the white paper, a timeline was taking shape. The first mark was for yesterday, the day Mark had withdrawn the money. Next to it, Leo noted, wire transfer, $175,432.58. Are you sure, Leo? I asked, my voice still trembling. I'm sure, he replied, not looking up. We do this the right way. Leo opened his tablet and started searching. His fingers flew across the screen with dizzying speed. Dad met with a realtor in Florida 2 weeks ago. I saw the appointment confirmation in the shared family email. A new point was added to the timeline. And here, he said, his voice dropping slightly as he pointed to a social media profile, is the account of a woman named Lydia Hart. The name was a knife twisting in my heart. Lydia Hart. The true love Mark had mentioned during a bitter fight a few months ago. The woman he used as an excuse to call our 20-year marriage a mistake. The call of true love, it turned out, was paid for with his own son's future. Her account is public, Leo continued, pulling me from my bitter thoughts. She just liked a series of real estate listings in that same area 3 days ago. Another mark was made on the board. I looked at my son, and for the first time in hours, the feeling of helplessness began to recede. Leo's calmness was infectious. His intellect was a lighthouse in the storm. I realized then that I wasn't alone in this fight. I had an ally, a strategist, and he was my son. The blank paper on the wall was no longer a symbol of our loss. It had become our war map. After drawing the last lines on the map, Leo packed up his markers and tablet and quietly went to his room. I was left alone in the office, but the space no longer felt silent. The map on the wall was like a projection screen, replaying 20 years of my marriage, now slashed through with the red arrows of betrayal. I stepped closer, my finger trembling as it touched the first timeline marker. Not the day Mark took the money, but a much more distant memory. Our wedding day. The wedding photo on my desk, our radiant smiles, suddenly felt agonizing to look at. Then the memory of Leo's birth, his tiny hand gripping Mark's finger. We had been a family. We had shared vows, shared dreams. Lydia Hart, true love. Mark had used those flowery words to justify his actions, as if his betrayal was some romantic epic. But standing before this map, I saw only the naked truth. He had traded his family for money and another woman. A familiar, searing pain tightened in my chest. The same pain I'd been suppressing for months during our separation. The tears I'd held back all morning finally fell, hot and silent. Not for the money, but for a family that was shattered. But then, a fear greater than my own heartbreak washed over me. Leo. My son had faced this horrifying truth with extraordinary composure. A part of me swelled with pride at his strength, but the other part, the mother's heart, was screaming in terror. What invisible scars would this forced maturity leave on his soul? Was he suppressing his own pain, putting on the armor of a strategist to protect me? Was this burden too much for a 15-year-old to bear? I wiped my tears, took a deep breath, and walked toward his room. The door was ajar, the bluish glow of a computer screen spilling out. He wasn't playing a game. He was reading articles on divorce law and asset division. I knocked softly on the door. Leo looked up, surprised. "Can I come in?" I asked. He nodded. I walked in and sat on the edge of his bed. "Leo," I began, my voice gentle, "I need to ask you. Are you okay?" "Really?" Leo swiveled his chair away from the computer to face me. "I'm okay, Mom. We have a plan. We'll be okay." "The plan is for the adults," I said, reaching out to smooth his messy hair. "I'm asking about you. Are you sad? Are you angry? You're allowed to feel all of it, honey. You don't have to be strong for me." Behind his glasses, Leo's eyes seemed to soften. The stoic mask on his face flickered, revealing the vulnerability of a child. "I'm angry," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I'm angry that he made you sad. The money, I can earn that back, but I can't stand seeing you cry." My heart broke. My son wasn't just shouldering the financial burden. He was trying to carry my pain too. I pulled him into my arms and held him tight. "Listen to me, Leo," I whispered into his hair. "My job is to protect you, not the other way around. We're a team, yes, but you are still my son. My sadness is mine to carry. You just need to let yourself be sad, be angry, be a kid who's been hurt. I'm right here with you." Leo didn't cry, but I felt the tension in his body slowly release in my embrace. We sat like that for a long time. In that moment, the war map in the other room seemed to fade away. It was just the two of us, facing the invisible wounds that betrayal had left behind. The next morning, as I was making coffee, trying to fuel up for the long day ahead, Leo walked into the kitchen, tablet in hand. He was dressed for school, but I knew his mind was elsewhere. "Mom," he said, "I've been running the scenarios. I don't think Dad took all the money just to have cash. Based on the Florida house hunt, it's likely his credit score, or Lydia's, isn't good enough to secure a large mortgage, so he'll probably try to use my information to commit fraud. A minor's credit history is a blank slate, the perfect tool for abuse." A shiver went down my spine. Mark wasn't just taking what we had, he was planning to steal a future we hadn't even built yet. I realized then that in a divorce, the most important door to lock isn't your front door, it's your child's credit. "So what do we do?" I asked, setting my coffee cup down. "First thing," Leo said, his voice as clear as an expert's, "we freeze my credit with all three major bureaus, Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. It will prevent anyone from opening a new line of credit in my name." He turned the tablet screen toward me. He already had the websites for all three credit bureaus pulled up. My son's preparedness was, once again, both stunning and reassuring. My panic was replaced by a clear objective. "Okay, let's do it right now," I said, my voice filled with resolve. We sat down together at the kitchen table, and with Leo guiding me, I completed the process of freezing his credit as his legal guardian. Confirmation emails landed in my inbox one by one, each one sounding like the satisfying click of a deadbolt sliding into place. We were rebuilding our fortress, one brick at a time. When the last email arrived, I turned to Leo. "Done. What else?" "There's more," I said, feeling a surge of strength. "And I'm filing for a temporary restraining order on all marital assets with my lawyer first thing tomorrow morning." I picked up my phone and began composing an email to my family lawyer. Every word I typed was decisive. I was no longer the weeping, betrayed wife. I was a mother protecting her child. The email was sent, carrying with it the request to prepare the TRO filing. We weren't just defending, we were starting to fight back. After that moment of vulnerability in Leo's room, a subtle shift occurred in our relationship. We weren't just mother and son. We were now a team, a true alliance forged in unspoken understanding. The morning after our first legal actions were taken, we returned to the war map. The next objective was clear. We needed to understand the enemy. The other woman didn't emerge from a shadowy doorway or in hushed, secret phone calls. In this digital age, she appeared in plain sight on LinkedIn, in Employee of the Month articles, and on her relatives' Instagram feeds. The irony was that in their quest to build a perfect personal brand, people inadvertently leave a trail of breadcrumbs leading straight to their darkest secrets. She was an open-source dataset, waiting to be assembled. "We need to know who she is, what she does, and what she's planning," I said, my voice now calm and focused. Leo nodded, tablet at the ready, his fingers flying across the screen with incredible precision, starting with the name Lydia Hart. A few swipes, and her portrait began to emerge. "Lydia Hart, Senior Client Advisor at Hart & Rowe Investments," Leo read aloud. "Impressive resume. There's even an article in a local finance journal praising her as a rising star, an expert in building trust and lasting relationships." The words felt like thorns in my side. This rising star was building her career on the ashes of my family. "Hart & Rowe Investments," I murmured, racking my brain. "That sounds familiar?" "I think your father mentioned it a few months ago. Said there was a good investment opportunity there." The lie now came into sharp focus. "They have a public events calendar on their company website," Leo said, zooming in on a page. "They're hosting a client appreciation gala at the Cypress Club this Friday night. It's a very exclusive private club." Another piece of the puzzle fell into place. But it wasn't enough to directly connect her to Mark. We needed something more concrete, something that put them in the same place at the same time. Try social media, I suggested. Her friends, her family. That's when we struck gold. A public Instagram account belonging to a young woman who identified herself as Lydia's cousin. She posted constantly. We scrolled through hundreds of photos of parties, vacations, and expensive meals until a recent story made me hold my breath. It was a short video, filmed at the bar of a very chic-looking venue, filled with the chaotic clinking of glasses and background music, with a glittery caption, "Celebrating my girl Lydia Hart's promotion." The location was tagged, the Cypress Club. "Leo, stop!" I said urgently, my voice catching. He replayed the video. The image was shaky and a bit blurry, focused on Lydia laughing and raising a glass with her friends. But in the far corner of the frame, for just a split second, a familiar figure drifted past, a man wearing the blue dress shirt I had bought Mark for his birthday last year. "Look," I pointed at the screen, my heart hammering. Mark's arm. "That's your father's shirt." Leo zoomed in, and though the face was unclear, there was no mistaking it. It was him. They weren't just planning in secret. They were publicly celebrating their victory, built on our pain. While I trembled with a mix of rage and hurt, Leo was already in motion. He calmly took a screenshot of the story before it could vanish after 24 hours. "That's enough," Leo said, his voice firm. They were there together. "We have proof." Our war map gained a new entry, circled in red, a cold, bright point of truth. The picture of their betrayal was becoming sharper, painted not with emotion, but with the cold, undeniable facts they had left behind themselves. The digital world had given us the first pieces, the fleeting images of Mark and Lydia's plan. But the next breakthrough came from the most unexpected place, Mark's own carelessness in the physical world. It wasn't a cracked password. It was a single sheet of paper, left forgotten on the kitchen counter, tucked between a stack of unpaid utility bills and pizza flyers I was about to throw out. That evening, as I was cleaning the kitchen, trying to restore some small sense of order to my chaotic life, my eye caught a strange logo on the corner of a document. Sunbay Mortgage. Curious, I pulled it out. It wasn't a bill. It was a multi-page document. "Leo, come look at this," I called, my voice tight with urgency. Leo walked into the kitchen and we huddled together over the paper under the warm yellow light, a painfully normal family scene. The bold text at the top of the page made my heart stop. Loan estimate. Borrower's name, Mark Patterson. Property address, an address in Naples, Florida. Loan amount, a staggering figure. I scanned the details, past the complex financial terms, until a small line in the loan conditions section laid their entire plan bare. "Listen to this," I read aloud, my finger trembling as I pointed to the text. "Sunbay Mortgage, loan estimate, condition of funding, verification of down payment funds sourced from joint savings account." It all clicked together with horrifying perfection. The money Mark had taken wasn't for frivolous spending. It was the down payment for the Florida house. He was using our son's future as the foundation for his new life. He didn't even bother to change the mailing address, Leo said, pointing to our home address printed neatly on the document. He was so confident you'd never notice one piece of misplaced mail. It's perfect. Mark's carelessness was the greatest gift he could have given us. I immediately used my phone to photograph every single page, making sure every number, every line of text was crystal clear. Later that night, a missed call from an unknown number appeared on our home landline. I checked the voicemail. A cheerful, professional woman's voice came on. "Hi, Mr. Patterson. This is Brenda from Sunbay Mortgage, calling to confirm a few details on your file." I immediately recorded the entire voicemail onto my cell phone. That night, our war map gained an irrefutable piece of physical evidence. Next to the Instagram screenshot now sat the copy of an official document. Our fight was no longer based on digital breadcrumbs. Now we had it in black and white. With the loan estimate in hand, we had our ultimate weapon, undeniable physical proof. Our fight was now ready to shift from intelligence gathering to direct action. The next morning, my office was no longer a place of sorrow. It had become a command center. The air was thick with focus, punctuated only by the clicking of a keyboard and the smell of strong coffee. The war map on the wall was covered in notes and arrows connecting events, looking like a complex military plan. Leo stood before it, as calm as a general before a battle. "It's time, Mom," he said, his voice unwavering. "We have enough to start knocking on the right doors." I sat down at the computer, taking a deep breath to steady myself. "Tell me where we start." "We launch a three-pronged attack," Leo explained, pointing to each circled target on the map. "First, we send everything to the compliance department at Hart and Rowe. Lydia Hart used her position to advise Dad on a financial plan that personally benefited her, built on an asset of questionable origin. That's a massive conflict of interest. In the financial world, that's an unforgivable sin." He continued, his voice crisp and clear. "Second, to the fraud department at Sunbay Mortgage. Dad applied for a loan using a down payment obtained through the misuse of shared marital assets during a legal separation. You are a co-owner of that account, and you never gave consent. To a lender, a fraudulent application isn't just a risk, it's a stain. They'll act to protect themselves first. And finally," Leo took a breath, his gaze firm, "we file a formal complaint with the State Attorney General's office for dissipation of marital assets. This is the nuclear option. It takes our story from a domestic dispute to a matter of state legal interest and puts his every move under official scrutiny." I nodded, feeling a cold surge of power. "You draft them. I'll be the one to sign." And so we began. I wrote the 3 calmest letters of my life. Every sentence was polished, turning pain and rage into sharp, logical arguments, without a single word of blame or a drop of emotional pleading. Just dates, numbers, and logical arrows pointing to the truth. Leo carefully attached each digital file: the bank account screenshots, the Instagram story, the scanned loan estimate, and the audio file of Brenda's voicemail. For each letter, Leo navigated the complex online portals: Hart and Rowe's anonymous whistleblower portal, Sunbay's fraud reporting form, the Attorney General's civil complaint portal. With each click of the submit button, I held my breath. It felt like we were firing an arrow that could never be taken back. The dry click of the mouse echoed in the quiet room, carrying the weight of justice. Then we waited. The silence stretched for nearly an hour, so tense I could hear my own heartbeat. And then, the first pings from my inbox shattered the quiet. 3 automated, impersonal emails. But to us, they were more precious than gold. The first: Hart and Rowe Investments has received your submission. Your case number is number HRI 611. The second: the Sunbay Fraud Department has received your report. Your reference number is number FS2847. The third: the Attorney General's office confirms receipt of your complaint. Your file number is number AG-CIV-9205. Leo took a red marker and walked to the war map. Next to each target, he carefully wrote down the corresponding case number. They weren't just numbers. They were the first gears of a giant machine that had just begun to turn at our command. They were doors that had just been opened. They were proof that our voice had been heard. The battle had officially begun. The case numbers on the war map were small victories, gears that had begun to turn in a slow, bureaucratic machine. But Leo and I both knew that official investigations would take time. Weeks, maybe even months. In the meantime, Mark and Lydia could still push forward with their plan, still potentially close on the house before any injunction was issued. Every day was a risk, and we didn't have the luxury of time. We needed more leverage, a shock that could fracture their plan from the inside, an attack on the very foundation of their illicit alliance. And that target could only be one person: Thomas Hart, Lydia's father, a titan of the business world whose reputation was built on integrity and ironclad principles. On Friday evening, as Leo was reviewing our data, a bold idea came to me. "Leo, I think we've been missing a move," I said. "We've knocked on the doors of justice. Now we need to knock on the door of pride." I didn't need him to believe me. I just needed him to believe in his own reputation. The Hart name, which he had spent a lifetime building and protecting, could not be tarnished by a scandal involving a child's money. A man like that would never tolerate such a stain, even if it came from his own daughter. I took out a piece of heavy, cream-colored stationery, the kind I saved for special occasions. Inside the envelope, I didn't write a long, emotional letter. A man like Thomas Hart had no time for tears. I enclosed only two things: a clean, concise printout of Leo's timeline of public facts and the information from the legally obtained loan estimate. At the bottom, on a separate note card, I handwrote a single question in black ink. Mr. Hart, is the reputation of your family being built on the foundation of a minor's college savings? No accusations, no pleading, no emotion. Just a question, sharp as a razor, aimed directly at the pride and legacy he valued above all else. I changed into a conservative dress, trying to look more like a member of his world than a mother on the verge of desperation. I drove to the Cypress Club. The building was stately and quiet, warm yellow light spilling from its large windows, a world away from the chaos of my own life. I walked into the marble-floored lobby where a uniformed concierge stood behind a gleaming oak desk. The air was thick with wealth and power. "Excuse me," I said, my voice calm and polite, hiding the tremor in my chest. "Could I ask for your help with something?" The concierge smiled professionally, a practiced expression that betrayed no curiosity. "Of course, ma'am." I placed the envelope on the cool countertop. "Please have this delivered to Mr. Thomas Hart. I was told he is here this evening. It's a matter of great importance." The concierge looked at me, then at the envelope. Her professional smile didn't waver, but a flicker of hesitation crossed her eyes. "Ma'am, as a rule, we cannot accept personal deliveries for members without prior instruction. Do you have an appointment?" This was the first hurdle, and I had anticipated it. I leaned forward slightly, lowering my voice. "No, I don't. But it's an urgent family matter concerning his daughter, Lydia Hart. I believe he will want to receive this immediately." The name Lydia Hart seemed to work. The concierge's expression shifted, her professionalism now tinged with cautious curiosity. She nodded. "Please wait one moment, ma'am." She picked up an internal phone, dialed, and spoke in low tones. I only caught fragments. "A lady here, an envelope, regarding Ms. Lydia." After a moment, she hung up, her demeanor completely changed. The hesitation was gone, replaced by a sober seriousness. "Mr. Hart's assistant has confirmed," she said, taking the envelope with a new formality. "I will ensure Mr. Hart receives this right away, ma'am." Before leaving, I discreetly pulled out my phone and took a picture. The cream-colored envelope sitting on the polished counter, the logo of the Cypress Club visible in the background. One more piece of evidence for our log. Driving home through the dark, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt a cold, clear calm. I had just planted a seed of doubt in the most fertile ground imaginable, a seed that would be watered by Thomas Hart's own pride. Now all I could do was wait to see what would grow. The days after I sent the letter to the Cypress Club passed in a tense silence. The atmosphere in the house grew thick, and every phone ring, every new email notification, made my heart jump into my throat. The seed of doubt had been planted, but I had no way of knowing if it would sprout into a furious storm or simply wither away. The silence from Thomas Hart was more unnerving than any threat. At the same time, the legal gears we had set in motion began their slow, deliberate turn. My lawyer, a woman named Helen with sharp eyes and a calm voice, informed me that an emergency hearing for the Temporary Restraining Order, TRO, had been scheduled. Stepping into the county courthouse, I felt small and out of place. This wasn't like the movies, with their grand hallways and cavernous courtrooms. It was a functional, mundane government building, heavy with the smell of old paper, wood varnish, and the intangible sadness that seemed to seep from the beige walls. The people sitting on the waiting benches looked like me, their faces etched with their own stories of broken trust and exhaustion. There was no jury, no curious audience, just us, our lawyers, and a stern-faced judge whose eyes had seen 100 family tragedies just like ours. Mark arrived a few minutes after I did. He wasn't alone. Beside him was an expensive-looking lawyer in a perfectly tailored suit, carrying a polished leather briefcase. Mark, too, was dressed in one of his best suits, a crisp white shirt and a silk tie, looking more like a successful businessman closing a deal than a husband facing accusations of asset stripping. He walked with a forced confidence, but I could see the tension in his clenched fists. When our eyes met, I saw no remorse. There was only the naked anger of a man who'd been caught, a selfish indignation that his perfect plan had been disrupted. His look told me that in his world, I was the one at fault for not suffering in silence. We sat at opposing wooden tables. A space of only a few feet felt like a chasm between two worlds. The hearing began. Helen presented our evidence concisely, without a trace of emotion. Her voice was flat, cool as a medical report. She produced the bank statement showing the massive transfer, the text messages where Mark admitted to borrowing the funds, and finally, the loan estimate in his and Lydia Hart's names. She didn't speak of betrayal or my pain. She simply connected the facts, creating an irrefutable chain of truth that demonstrated a clear and present danger of further asset dissipation. On the other side, Mark's lawyer stood. He was more theatrical, his voice booming slightly. He tried to paint a different picture. "Your Honor, this was not a clandestine act," he argued, gesturing dramatically. "My client, Mr. Patterson, was merely performing a necessary personal financial restructuring during a sensitive time. It was a prudent business decision, a matter of liquidity management in preparation for the future. There was no intent to dissipate assets whatsoever." I sat still, my hands clasped so tightly in my lap that my knuckles turned white. A cold contempt rose within me as I listened to him. He was trying to turn theft into a sterile business term, betrayal into a financial strategy. He was erasing 20 years of marriage, erasing our son's future, with empty, deceitful words. I didn't look at Mark. I focused only on the judge, who was flipping through the documents with a detached concentration. He wasn't swayed by fancy words or emotional drama. For him, only the facts on the paper mattered. After a few minutes of silence that felt like an eternity, when both lawyers had finished, the judge looked up. He didn't look at the lawyers. He looked directly at Mark, then at me. The room was quiet except for the ticking of the wall clock. The court issues a temporary order, restraining either party from dissipating, transferring, or encumbering any marital assets pending the next hearing, he said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. But every word was a hammer blow to Mark's plan. The judge's wooden gavel came down on the desk with a soft, final tap. Thud. The sound was dry and decisive. It wasn't the sound of victory, not a cheer of triumph. It was the sound of a door being locked just in time, the sound of a safety brake being pulled. "This is ridiculous," I heard Mark mutter to his lawyer, the impotent rage clear in his voice. His manufactured confidence had vanished, replaced by the shock of a man unaccustomed to being told no. I bowed my head, slowly releasing a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding for days. No, it wasn't ridiculous. It was sanity. It was the first step toward regaining control, toward rebuilding the fortress around my son's future. It was the first official recognition that my pain and my fears were valid. On the way home, Helen emailed me a scanned copy of the court order, stamped in red. I opened it, staring at the official seal and the judge's signature. It wasn't just a file. It was a shield. It was an affirmation that in this fight, we were not alone. Another piece had been set firmly in place on our war map. The court's TRO was a shield, but I knew it wasn't a sword. It could only prevent future damage, not undo what had already been done. The silence from Thomas Hart after my letter was the real wild card. With each passing day, that silence grew heavier. I waited, unsure if I was waiting for a phone call, a letter, or if the silence itself was the final answer, a cold dismissal. A few days after the hearing, while Leo and I were reviewing the war map, my phone rang with an unknown number. The area code was from a prestigious law firm downtown. My heart hammered, a mix of hope and fear. "Hello, Mrs. Patterson," a man's voice said. It was polite but cold, the voice of someone used to delivering important news without emotional inflection. He introduced himself as Thomas Hart's personal attorney. I held my breath, signaling for Leo to be quiet. "Yes, this is she." "I'm calling at the direction of Mr. Hart," the lawyer said, getting straight to the point. "He received your package at the Cypress Club. Upon receipt, he initiated an independent verification of the information you provided. The verification took only a few hours. A few hours. The speed was staggering. What had taken us weeks to piece together, a man like Thomas Hart could unravel in a matter of hours." A short, tense pause followed. "And," I prompted, "and Mr. Hart has asked me to inform you of two things," the lawyer continued in that same flat tone. "First, A full internal investigation has been launched at Hart and Rowe Investments into Ms. Lydia Hart for conflict of interest and other professional ethical violations. Second, the entirety of the evidence you provided, along with our own verification findings, has been turned over to the State Attorney General's office. I sank into my chair, my legs suddenly weak. This was no longer just a domestic dispute. It had escalated into a corporate scandal and a potential criminal case. The lawyer went on, as if reading from a script. Mr. Hart also asked me to relay a personal message to you. It is, and I quote, "The Hart name is not built on the college funds of children." It wasn't an apology, nor was it an offer of help. It was a declaration of principle, cold and absolute. He wasn't acting for me. He was acting for his own legacy. The call ended as abruptly as it began. I put the phone down, my hands still shaking. I had planted a seed of doubt, and it had grown into a tree of justice from the most unexpected quarter. That night, I didn't have to imagine what had happened. A firestorm of angry, panicked text messages from Mark painted the entire picture. He and Lydia had been sitting in a private dining room at the Cypress Club, trying to sell her father on the Florida investment opportunity. In the middle of their pitch, Mark's phone had rung. It was his company's compliance department. "Why is my loan application on hold?" I could picture Mark's voice shifting from surprise to alarm as he accidentally left the phone on speaker in his confusion. And then the voice on the other end, sharp and non-negotiable, had extinguished all his hopes. "Sir, we are investigating a high-level directive regarding a potential conflict of interest and questionable source of funds." Mark texted that Thomas Hart hadn't even gotten angry. He didn't yell or slam the table. His reaction was far more terrifying. He had simply placed his silver fork down on his plate, looked at his daughter with eyes as cold as ice, and said, "Lydia, our conversation is over." A brief, final judgment that ended everything. The collapse was swift and brutal. A few days later, an official letter from Sunbay Mortgage arrived at my house, informing me the loan application has been suspended pending investigation. It was quickly followed by a letter from the Attorney General's office, confirming they had received additional evidence from an anonymous third party. Our war map had new pieces, not found by us, but delivered by our opponent's own self-destruction. The official letters from Sunbay Mortgage and the Attorney General's office were the final thunderbolts that brought Mark's carefully constructed world crashing down. I thought he would go quiet, that he would hide and try to strategize. I was wrong. When a selfish, arrogant man gets scared, he doesn't call to apologize. He calls to find someone to blame. My phone rang late one afternoon as Leo and I were taping new slips of paper to the war map, slips that read, "Loan suspended and AG file acknowledged." The name Mark flashed on the screen, a provocative pulse of light. I looked at Leo. He gave me a calm, steady nod, as if he'd been expecting this. I took a deep breath, willing my racing heart to slow, and answered the call. "It was you, wasn't it?" Mark's voice hissed through the phone. No greeting, just raw, undiluted panic and rage. "You did something. Someone's targeting me. They're targeting Lydia." His voice was laced with self-pity. He saw himself not as the perpetrator, but as the victim. I stayed silent for a moment, letting his panic expose itself in the quiet space between us. "I don't know what you're talking about," I replied, my voice cool and even. I had rehearsed this moment, had promised myself I would not let emotion take over. "Don't play dumb with me," he screamed. "Everything. The loan, Lydia's job, her father's reputation. It's all falling apart. This is a coordinated attack. Who did you hire? A hacker?" I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the quiet garden. The roses I had planted were still in bloom, a peaceful contrast to the storm on the phone. "No one is targeting you, Mark," I said, my voice maintaining its lethal calm. "The numbers are targeting you. Your actions are targeting you." "The numbers? Actions? What the hell are you talking about?" He still couldn't grasp it. "In Mark's world, things only happened because someone did something to you, not as a natural consequence of your own choices." As he ranted, I saw Leo quickly scribble something on a notepad. He wasn't rattled by the screaming. He was acting with the focus of a professional. He pushed the note across the table toward me. 2 lines were written in clear block letters. I glanced down at the note, and a cold sense of power rose in me. This wasn't revenge. It was systematized justice. I spoke into the phone, my voice clear, as if reading an official announcement. If you want to know who is targeting you, perhaps you should start with these numbers. Your complaint file number with Sunbay Mortgage is number FS2847, and the investigation file at Hart and Row Compliance is number HRI611. The other end of the line went completely silent. That silence was louder than all his shouting. It was the silence of a man who had been sprinting full speed and had just run headfirst into a concrete wall. I could almost hear the gears in Mark's mind grinding to a halt as he realized the person behind this wasn't some anonymous hacker or a business rival, but me, the wife he had so thoroughly underestimated. And I had done it all publicly, legally, with officially recorded case numbers. "You," was all he managed to get out, his voice now stripped of everything but shock and unconcealed fear. He was out of ammunition. I didn't wait for him to say more. I didn't give him the chance to beg or threaten. "I have things to do, Mark." And I hung up. I turned to look at Leo. My son didn't smile. He just nodded, a silent acknowledgement of our victory. I took a fresh sticky note, wrote, "Mark called," panicked, and pinned it to the map. The war wasn't over, but the balance of power had irrevocably shifted. Mark's call was a declaration of his defeat, but I knew a man like him wouldn't give up so easily. When he couldn't win with numbers, he tried to win with lies. But my son was prepared for that too. The counterattack came from the most unexpected place, Leo's school. The next morning, I received a call from the principal's office, requesting an urgent meeting that afternoon. No specific reason was given, just a formal, non-negotiable request. A sense of unease crept over me. When Leo and I walked into the principal's office, I understood everything. Mark was already there, sitting in the chair opposite the principal's desk. He no longer looked panicked. Instead, he wore the mask of a pained, concerned father, his eyes heavy and his shoulders slumped. It was a masterful performance. "Hello," the principal, Mrs. Davis, said, her tone a little strained. "Thank you for coming in. Mr. Patterson has raised some serious concerns that we need to discuss." I sat down, placing a hand on Leo's shoulder, a gesture meant to reassure both him and myself. Mark began his calculated monologue, his voice trembling slightly for effect. "Mrs. Davis, I'm here because I am deeply worried about my son, Leo," he began, shooting a reproachful look at me. "Since our separation, my ex-wife, she has been filling his head with false narratives. He's very gifted with computers, and I have reason to believe he's been encouraged to engage in dangerous activities, possibly hacking, to disrupt my personal and professional life." He paused, taking a pained breath. "I don't blame him. He's just a child who's being manipulated. I'm here to ask for the school's help to protect my son from this negative influence." The air in the room grew heavy. The principal looked at Leo with an expression of mingled concern and scrutiny. Mark's attack was vicious. He was turning us into the villains, twisting our self-defense into an act of bullying, and using the school itself as a weapon against his own son. Before I could voice my outrage, Leo calmly pushed his chair back. He showed no fear, no anger. My son calmly placed a thin, neatly organized folder on the principal's desk. "Mrs. Davis," Leo began, his voice clear and steady, nothing like that of a child being manipulated. "I understand my father's concern, but what he's suggesting is not accurate. I haven't hacked anyone." He opened the folder. "These are the official confirmations that my mother and I proactively froze my credit at all 3 major credit bureaus," he said, pointing to the first page. "We took this defensive measure after discovering a risk that my identity could be used for illicit financial purposes." Leo turned to the next page. "And these are the official case numbers for the complaints my mother filed with the proper authorities regarding the misuse of shared marital assets. Every action we've taken has been documented, public, and in full compliance with the law, ma'am. We are simply protecting ourselves." Silence filled the room. Leo's words, reinforced by irrefutable evidence, had completely dismantled Mark's performance. The principal's concerned expression slowly melted into one of understanding, then sharpened into disapproval as she looked at Mark. His act was over. His mask of anguish was now twisted with anger and humiliation. He had lost, not just on the legal front, but on the moral one, right in front of the very people he was trying to manipulate. We left the office in silence. The meeting minutes, along with a copy of the documents Leo presented, were added to our growing arsenal of evidence. The counterattack had turned into another spectacular own goal for Mark. That afternoon, we drove home from the confrontation at school. The mood in the car wasn't heavy. Instead, there was a comfortable silence, filled with understanding. I glanced at Leo in the passenger seat. The late afternoon sun glinted off his glasses, hiding his eyes but not the calm set of his jaw. My son hadn't just defended himself. He had defended the truth. And the truth, when presented clearly and methodically, had an unshakable power. That evening, we had dinner under the warm yellow light of the kitchen. The meal didn't taste of fear or anger, but of resolve. The simple pasta I'd made seemed more delicious than usual, not because of the recipe, but because of the sense of solidarity and stability between us. We had weathered another battle together and had emerged standing. "Leo," I said, breaking the pleasant silence, "what you did today, I am so proud of you." Leo looked up from his pasta, his glasses having slipped down his nose slightly. He offered a small smile. "I just presented the facts, Mom. I learned that from you." I smiled back. "That's right. And tomorrow, we're going to present the court with a lot more facts." I put my fork down, my voice growing more serious. "I spoke with Helen. I'm going to her office tomorrow to sign a notarized affidavit, submitting our entire supplementary file to the court." I listed the items: the complete timeline, the bank statements, the loan suspension letter from Sunbay, the confirmation from Mr. Hart's lawyer, and the minutes from today's school meeting. Leo nodded, fully understanding the importance of this step. "So, the court sees we're only being defensive, not aggressive," he said, articulating exactly what I was thinking. "We're not slinging mud. We're presenting evidence to defend ourselves against false accusations." Exactly. Every move we had made, from freezing his credit to filing the complaints, had been defensive. Our only counterattack was the truth. After dinner, we organized the file one last time. Every page was a piece of the puzzle, a testament to Mark's greed and deception. When it was all neatly compiled in a blue binder, I felt a strange sense of relief. This was no longer a chaotic mess of betrayal and pain. It had been transformed into a legal record, cold, logical, and undeniable. That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept deeply, without dreams. The fortress protecting our future was being built, brick by brick, with truth and resolve. A few weeks after we submitted the supplementary file, the next court hearing took place. This time, the atmosphere in the courtroom was entirely different. The weight of the thick binder we had filed seemed to hang in the air, palpable and invisible. Mark was no longer confident or angry. He looked tired and defeated, hunched beside his lawyer. His expensive suit couldn't hide the gauntness of his face or his slumped shoulders. The mountain of evidence we presented, from the detailed timeline to the school meeting minutes, had created an impenetrable wall of truth. There wasn't much of a fight. Mark's lawyer offered a few weak excuses about financial hardship and good intentions in restructuring assets. But the words sounded hollow and meaningless next to the stark clarity of the documents and figures. Every one of his arguments was silently and powerfully refuted by the papers we had filed. The judge, having reviewed the entire file, delivered his temporary ruling. He didn't take long. To him, the case seemed clear-cut. There were no cheers in the courtroom, no tears of joy. Just the judge's steady voice reading out the terms, each word a brick rebuilding the foundation of my son's future. And then, on the paper Helen handed me, I saw the decisive lines. "The respondent, Mr. Patterson, is ordered to restore the full amount withdrawn from the joint savings account into a designated trust for the sole educational benefit of the minor child, Leo, within 30 days. All major expenditures from any other marital assets will require court approval pending a final divorce decree." It wasn't a victory. It was balance restored. A wrong that had been righted. The stolen money would be returned to its rightful place. My son's future was now protected by the full weight of the law. I glanced over at Mark. He had his head down, hands clasped on the table, staring at the polished wood as if hoping it would swallow him whole. For the first time, I didn't feel anger or contempt. I just felt a distant sadness for the man my husband had become, the man who had destroyed everything out of greed and selfishness. In addition to the restitution order, the court appointed a forensic accountant to review all of Mark's finances. A detailed schedule was attached. Every one of his accounts, every transaction, would now be under a microscope. The financial freedom he craved had just become a glass cage. As we walked out of the courthouse, the sun was bright. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the clean air. The war wasn't completely over. The final divorce settlement was still ahead. But the most important battle had been won. We hadn't sought revenge. We had simply reclaimed what was ours. The court's ruling restored balance to my family, but I knew the story wasn't over. The wheels of justice we had set in motion were still turning, slowly but unstoppably, and this time they were turning toward Lydia Hart. Our pain had become a case file, and that file now had a life of its own. The news arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, in a brief, almost clinical email from the Hart and Rowe Investments Compliance Department. It was the official response to the complaint I had filed weeks ago, an email I had almost forgotten about in the whirlwind of court dates. It appeared in my inbox, the subject line a simple, complaint number HRI 611. The message was curt, written in cold corporate language devoid of any emotion. Dear Mrs. Patterson, this email is to confirm that we have received and processed your complaint. Following a preliminary inquiry, Ms. Lydia Hart has been placed on temporary administrative leave, pending a full and comprehensive investigation. We are unable to provide further details at this time due to privacy protocols. I read the email again and again. Temporary administrative leave. In the world of high finance, where reputation is everything, a suspension was tantamount to a career death sentence. The career Lydia was so proud of, the rising star status she had used to dazzle Mark, was now hanging by the thinnest of threads. Her father's decision to place his name above his own blood had brought swift and devastating consequences. That evening, when I told Leo, he listened in silence, his eyes not leaving his computer screen, though I knew he was hanging on my every word. There wasn't a trace of gloating on my son's face. We don't celebrate anyone's downfall, Leo, I said softly, placing a hand on his shoulder. I felt I needed to say it, as much for myself as for him. Leo looked up at me, his eyes clear behind his glasses. I'm not celebrating, Mom, he said calmly. I'm not happy she lost her job. I'm just glad that what happened to us won't happen to other families. I'm glad that the money of other kids, of elderly people who trust that firm, will be safer. My son's words made me realize something. This fight had long since stopped being just about us. It had become a fight for what was right. Leo didn't see Lydia as an enemy whose fall should be celebrated. He saw a broken system that was being fixed, a loophole that was being closed. My son wasn't thinking about personal revenge. He was thinking about systemic integrity. I carefully saved the email from Hart and Rowe. It wasn't just a notification. It was proof that our actions had created a ripple, one that might just protect someone else down the line. And to us, that meant more than any act of revenge ever could. Our life slowly found its rhythm again, a new one that was quieter and more stable. The money was returned to the trust account as ordered by the court, a cold number on a screen that brought a warm feeling of security. The letters from official agencies became less frequent. The war map still hung on the office wall, but it was no longer the center of our universe. It had become a relic, a monument to a battle we had fought and survived. Every morning, I would watch my son sit at the kitchen table, carefully tying his shoelaces before leaving for school. That simple, repetitive act held a profound meaning for me. He tied them neatly and tightly, each movement deliberate, as if he were methodically lacing our lives back together, tightening the knots of our future. One morning, as I was making coffee, its gentle aroma filling the kitchen, my phone buzzed with a text from an unsaved number. It was Mark. I'm sorry. I know it's too late, but I really am sorry. I want to start over. I read the message and felt nothing. Not anger, not joy. Just a cold, empty space. Start over? I thought, a sad smile touching my lips. He thought he could just reboot our lives with a single text message, as if it were a game. Start by repaying first. And not just the money. Repay the shattered trust, the sleepless nights, the innocence my son had to sacrifice to become a reluctant strategist. Those were things that could never be started over. I held my finger on the screen and, without hesitation, deleted the message. Leo walked into the kitchen, tablet in hand, the smell of toast trailing behind him. He knew nothing of the text, and I had no intention of telling him. My past didn't need to be a burden on his future. "Mom," Leo said, his face bright with pride. "Look, I finished it." He held the tablet out to me. On the screen was a professionally designed PDF. The title read, "Basic Financial Safety for Parents, a Legal Defense Handbook." "I finished the checklist to send to the school's parent association today," Leo said, excitement sparkling in his eyes. I scrolled through the document. It wasn't just a list. It was a well-researched guide, broken down into clear sections. Warning signs to watch for, unusual credit offers, strange creditor calls. A step-by-step guide to freezing a minor's credit, how to file complaints with regulatory bodies. It was everything we had learned, distilled into a tool to help others. My son had turned his own trauma into a source of strength to protect his community. The pain hadn't broken him. It had forged him into a young man of immense strength, empathy, and responsibility. I looked up at him, my heart filled with a pride greater than any court victory could provide. "It's wonderful, Leo," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "It's truly wonderful." That PDF was the final piece on our war map. It wasn't evidence of a battle that was over, but a symbol of a new future. A future where we would not only protect ourselves, but also help others find their own path to justice. Our lives, like Leo's shoelaces, were being tied back together, knot by knot, secure and full of hope. If you found this story compelling, please like the video, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. To listen to the next story, click the video on the left. Thanks for listening.